Good evening, Hindol. It's a pleasure to welcome you here onto Global Order. You've been giving a lot of interviews on Bangladesh and related topics, so why not here as well?
Global Order, absolutely. And this is a great opportunity for me to talk about Bangladesh on Global Order. I mean, I've had one or two conversations, including with my friend Bikramjit Banerjee on Bangladesh. But it's great to be able to put forward all the things I'm seeing and constantly tracking in Bangladesh, Ishan. Lots of things are happening, as you know. Global Order's parent company, Grin Publishers, just published this big book on Bangladesh,
Right.
uh, on the takeover of Jamaat of Bangladeshi politics. There's a big election coming up. We're worried about a whole bunch of things. So lots to discuss.
Right. And before we actually do get into Bangladesh, if we just come across the border into the state of West Bengal in India, which is incidentally where you're from and very familiar with what's happening, we're sort of seeing a continuation of political violence in Murshidabad in connection to the SIP. And as I'm sure you're already aware, there have been waves of political violence in Murshidabad. What do you make of it? I've often noticed you use the phrase on your Twitter saying demography is destiny. Is that somehow tied into all of this? What do you think?
Look, I mean, you're absolutely right that this SIR thing in Bengal is getting problematic. Um, I see the Murshidabad, the blocking of this arterial highway in Murshidabad
Yeah, NH12.
repeatedly. Repeatedly, the blocking of this highway in Murshidabad, especially, is very, very tricky. In my opinion, there is an entire constituency in Bengal which essentially are either illegal Bangladeshis or essentially illegal Bangladeshis and like a combination and
Right.
are Islamists. Basically, these are Islamists from Bangladesh who found refuge by crossing the border when Sheikh Hasina was in power in Bangladesh. And these people have infiltrated the population in the border districts in a very large way. Now, I mean, just 2 days ago, by the way, somebody from the Indian Army was telling me that, in fact, there was an army recruitment that was happening and they got a huge number of applications from Bengal. Now, when they began to check in Delhi, they realized that many of these people, even though they have Indian documents, so to speak,
Right.
very clear the moment you dig a little deeper that in fact they are not Indians. Imagine this demographic is now trying to get into the police in Bengal, the administration in Bengal, and even trying to get into the Indian army. So this is very, very tricky and very, very problematic. And this cutting off of this Murshidabad arterial highway again and again is, in my opinion, a sign. They are trying to convey that they have the ability to cut off even Bengal. See, till now they used to talk about cutting off the chicken's neck to take out the whole of the northeast of India.
Right. The
Now
Siliguri
they're
corridor.
also trying to, that's right, the Siliguri corridor. Now they're trying to also imply that their demographics has become so strong that they can even cut off Bengal. Now, this brings back as a Bengali very, very bad memories. Remember, the partition of Bengal happened exactly like this. And let us not forget, historically, Ishan, Bengal was partitioned twice, not once. So
That's right.
therefore, this brings back very bad memories and no good will come out of this. I do think that the situation in these areas of Bengal is very precarious. It is unbelievable that many people still are in denial about this, including in Bengal. But it's a very precarious situation.
When you look at the ruling party in Bengal, and in particular the incumbent, the chief minister, there was perhaps it was just rhetoric, but at least at one time she did talk about being tough on illegal immigration. And now there seems to have been a complete 180. How would you explain that?
Absolutely. I mean, the incumbent chief minister, when the CPM was in power, she was one of the most forceful voices talking about the problem of illegal immigration. Because essentially, what did the CPM do? And the same thing has continued even till today. they basically brought in, because they found that the existing Bengali population was obviously not very enthused about voting for them repeatedly, obviously because they were terrible at governance and they really destroyed the state. So they kept on bringing in this illegal immigrants in constituency after constituency in different parts of the state to ensure that they keep winning elections, because this was their captive vote bank. Now, what began as a trickle, obviously very quickly and over the last 30, 40, 50 years, really has become a demographic change. And the demographic change now is so strong in certain parts of Bengal that I think in those parts of Bengal, people think that they reign supreme. Nobody can check them. I give you the example of Sandesh Khali. When the Sandesh Khali incident happened, Ishan, and you see that Sheikh Shah Jahan, I want to remind viewers about what really happened in that case. Not only was the state so lax about arresting Sheikh Shah Jahan, who's basically a mafia leader, and was terrible atrocities. I mean, there was no crime in that area where he was not involved in. Now, of course, he was hand in glove with the administration, so therefore there was, they were trying to protect him. And if you remember that video of him marching into the police station as if he owns the place,
Absolutely.
Complete mafia character. But what has happened? I want to remind viewers of what has happened in that case. Only a couple of weeks ago, the main witness against Sheikh Shah Jahan was going in a car to give his deposition to the court with his son, when suddenly a truck hit him and killed the driver and his son. He barely escaped with his life. Of course, we are not stupid enough to believe that this could be an accident. Of course, it's not an accident.
Right.
So this, it's so what I'm trying to explain is it's as blatant as that. Essentially, if you raise your voice against these elements, they will just simply kill you. It is as blatant as that. And it's amazing that no one in Delhi is talking enough about this, but this was one of the most blatant cases when the witness was going to speak to the court about this and essentially was wiped out. Do you think that person will go back again to the court?
Of course, no,
right?
it's beyond witness intimidation. In fact, yes.
It's much beyond. This is not intimidation. This is just plain and simple murder. Right? So this is the real, this is the real face of Bengal. This is the real face of politics in Bengal. And we should be very aware of what we're talking about when we discuss this issue.
And we have assembly elections coming up in March. If the system really is as compromised as it seems, do you think this is something within the capabilities of a state government to solve, considering we're talking about decades of illegal immigration and, I guess, infiltration of numerous state systems?
Oh, I don't think so. I think this has gone way beyond the remit, as it were, of a state government. Look, what is going on in the border areas of Bengal is now really a national threat. And it really violates our national security. It threatens our sovereignty. It threatens our fundamental tenets of democracy. If you can completely compromise democracy in this manner, then what value is democracy, I would ask, right? It's obviously getting completely compromised. So this is no longer in the remit, and which is why there is this pushback against SIR, because SIR is one way to try and control this. And no doubt you will find lakhs of, missing people and illegal people and all kinds of things when you start to dig deeper. And that's why this pushback is so intense. So this is a very, very big problem. And I think, please remember, like I keep saying today also, I was giving a lecture and I was talking about this. Look, the eastern borders, we've always worried about our western and our northern border, Pakistan and China respectively. Right. But I think we have undervalued the criticality of our eastern border. And this eastern border with Bangladesh is getting more and more problematic and more fragile. So I think we really ought to put more focus on the east at the moment, because remember, our entire northeast belt, Assam, the whole of the northeast Bengal, all of it is very, very badly violated because of this.
And actually, coming to Bangladesh, since 2024, since we've seen the regime change over there and so forth, along with this renewed surge of Islamism that we see on the ground, much of the rhetoric, at least that we see online, concerns of a greater Bangladesh. And what do you have to say about that? Where is that coming from?
I mean, this has all been fueled by Jamaat, right? I mean,
Right.
this book release we were doing on this book called Seeds of Hate, which meticulously, I think it's probably the best book ever written about the rise of Jamaat in Bangladesh, written by Shahryar Kabir, one of the tallest intellectuals of Bangladesh, and Dipanjan Roy Chaudhary, who's the senior foreign policy journalist in India. Remember, Shahryar Kabir is in prison. He's an
Yeah.
elderly intellectual. He's in prison. It's pure political vendetta. But the meticulous detailing that Shahryar Kabir has done of this problem is absolutely breathtaking. And therefore, the issue here is that we really need to delve deeper into what's going on in Bangladesh. And all this greater Bangladesh idea, all of these things are fueled by the Jamaat. These are all Jamaat ideas, right? It's fueled by the Jamaat, and Jamaat really wants to, focus and push these ideas. Basically, see, they now mention this character called Titu Mir. Now, Titu Mir was this, this Muslim ruler who created a sort of Bengali kingdom at one point in history. And they basically, you will see that they now talk about when, this Sharif Osman Hadi was murdered in Bangladesh. His sister came out and said, this is a 200-year-old war that we are waging, against India, they usually say Bharat or Bharat instead of India.
Right.
What is this 200-year battle that they're fighting? They're basically fighting people they think of as apostates or kafirs or whatever. And they are trying to bring back this great Bengali kingdom. It's complete ridiculousness, of course. But all of this is further being fueled by Pakistan and China. There is no running away from it. And today, astonishingly, I heard, or rather read on social media that there is a news report that supposedly US officials have been telling the Jamaat that they are happy to coordinate with them or discuss with them. And I mean, what do they think? They're going to bring the Jamaat on board exactly like they did in Syria. I mean, that's ridiculous. They must remember this is the Muslim Brotherhood in South Asia. This is very, very bad news. And for the US or even these are unnamed officials, whoever they are, this is very bad idea. This is a very bad idea. I don't know what the US wants from Bangladesh. Maybe they want to carve out some territory to, push back against China. Whatever it is that they want, the fact is to trigger a resurgence of Islamism in this manner in Bangladesh would be very harmful, not only for Bangladesh, and of course adjoining countries like Myanmar and so on and so forth, but certainly it would be very bad news for India. In fact, I would argue it would also be bad news for China, but China is also much stronger. And China, it doesn't have the proximity that we do with Bangladesh quite in the same way. We are stuck because we have this, tremendous proximity with Bangladesh, and of course cultural affiliation and so on and so forth. So it's very tricky.
Yeah, and if I were to rewind the clock again back to 2024, soon, right before the unrest and the regime change happened, even Sheikh Hasina alluded to being threatened by the US. I believe there was even talk of her refusing them an airbase in the country. Since then, we've also had these strange incidences. I think a former U.S. Marine was found dead in Dhaka under very mysterious circumstances. What do you think the objective is there? I mean, do you think it really is out of trying to get a base, some kind of fixed asset, or is there more to this?
I have always asked, ever since I noticed about nearly 1.5 years before Sheikh Hasina was ousted, ever since I noticed that, the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Economist began to drumbeat against Sheikh Hasina, I was convinced that something was going wrong, because this is all a pattern, right? I mean, anybody who studies this a little bit knows that this is a pattern, and something they wanted from him, which she did not give. Now, she, of course, claimed that they wanted this, entire area, and they wanted to carve out this and that and the other,
Yeah.
and they wanted to create this separate sort of, land, in a sense, de facto governed by them. Of course, we don't know whether that's true or not.
Yeah, we can't check the veracity of
We
these
cannot
things.
check the veracity of that, absolutely, but certainly we know that she said this. And certainly, there were problems with the naval bases. You remember this entire controversy in Cox's Bazar and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So these were all, and the appearance of, or purchases from the Chinese, including submarines. So this was all becoming quite tricky. India has no choice but to deal with this. Bangladesh is very populous. It is 180 million odd people. And Yunus has proved to be a major disaster, as many people had predicted that he would be. So I worry very deeply that Bangladesh will become another persistent problem for India, as it has, as Pakistan has always been. The only silver lining to them, there is a silver lining in all of this, Ishan. The silver lining is the following: Sheikh Hasina is still very much around, right? Yeah. And I really believe that this election that will happen now in Bangladesh will be, in a sense, a penultimate election until Sheikh Hasina comes back in the next election. Today only I saw that Sheikh Hasina has recorded another audio clip where she's talking about how, there are 50% of the votes are Awami League votes. So why on earth would the Awami League be cut out from the elections? And as you know, they have banned the Awami League from participating in the election. Now, if she really has, she says 50%, but even if they have 30 to 40% of the vote, that's not going to disappear. That's not going to disappear so soon, especially since Sheikh Hasina is still alive, right? And she's alive and kicking. She's not unwell or anything like that. So therefore, I actually feel that at some point, Sheikh Hasina will return to Bangladesh. As you saw, Tariq Rahman has returned to Bangladesh, the BNP leader. Though, by the way, I heard that even his security is not guaranteed, right? Even his return, he's returned with his family. So I hope, of course, he remains safe. But I hear from people in Bangladesh that even his security, even though he's well guarded, is a bit shaky and a bit fragile. So I really think Bangladesh will go through a very ugly churn. If the West does not support the Jamaat traditionally had only 3-4%, 5% of the vote in Bangladesh, even though they, of course, ruled the streets and created a lot of havoc. You remember all these murders of bloggers and this, that, and the other, right? Even when Hasina was in power. So they still had, that sort of street muscle and street power. But I hear now that their vote percentage may have gone up to, double digits. And if that is really true, it's very bad news. But I do think what will happen in Bangladesh, which is the best case scenario, is that there will be a period of great turmoil. One election will go by. Whichever government comes to power will basically find that Bangladesh is impossible to govern. If Tariq Rahman comes to power with the Jamaat, the demands they will make of him will soon make it impossible for him to govern. And then there will be some return of Sheikh Hasina. But you see, the problem there, Ishan, is even if Sheikh Hasina returns, say 2 years later, 3 years later, she will still be an elderly person.
Yeah, it's not a long-term solution to it.
So what is the long-term solution of Bangladesh? This is the problem before India. The headache for India is there does not seem to be any emerging long-term solution to Bangladesh. There is, of course, Sheikh Hasina, of course, has a son, Shonjib, who's, popularly known as Joy. Bengalis have nicknames. So he's popularly called Joy. He's sitting in the United States. Now, I don't know whether he's ever in the scenario of Sheikh Hasina not being there. Will her son come and join politics in Bangladesh, take over the party? Who knows? It'll all depend on how volatile things become. But for now, I think there will be a period of great volatility. If the Jamaat genuinely comes, the Jamaat and there are actually, we keep talking about the Jamaat, but there are even worse groups in Bangladesh. You look at the Hizb ut Tahrir, right? Which actually found a place in Yunus's government. They are, if at all it's possible, even worse than the Jamaat. So if these kind of groups join government and get real power in Bangladesh, even if it's in alliance with the BNP, with Tariq Rahman, we are in for trouble. I mean, I want to remind you and our viewers that the last time the BNP was in power, all kinds of very radical elements and terrorist groups and stuff found refuge in Bangladesh, including to destabilize India's northeast. So you'll remember about 10 years ago, or a little more than 10 years ago, there were all these conversations about these groups getting, refuge in Bangladesh and so on and so forth. So this will be a bit of a problematic thing for India. And look, I mean, there's a lot of things we can do against Bangladesh, of course. I mean, so much of the economy, all of this, health, healthcare, all kinds of things are dependent, energy sources, they're all dependent on India. So we can do lots of things, but it will still remain fairly volatile. And the last thing you want is to have the kind of infiltration and problem creation that Pakistan does to us, right? Because then we will have to really fight one more significant battle on the other side. I worry about all this.
Yeah, and when you look at the Islamist street power in Bangladesh, this current rise that's happened, it's definitely pre-2024, but especially post-2024. Even if you look at the Dhaka University Student Union elections, I believe those were won by the Jamaat. How would you explain this tilt that has come to be? And I mean, even Sheikh Hasina used to pander to them in the past. I mean, is this a force that will have to be reckoned with and is here to stay in Bangladesh? What do you think?
I agree. I mean, this is indeed a problem. And you see, we keep talking about, the Muslim Brotherhood and its connections with Qatar and so on and so forth. One of the countries that is really propelling this, behind the scenes, and Muslim Brotherhood activity around the world, apart from, of course, Pakistan, is Turkey, right? I mean, in fact, Turkey has really become, in a sense, the godfather of Muslim Brotherhood work around the world. And people keep blaming Qatar, and of course Qatar does have a hand, but Qatar is today, as of today, far more restrained than Turkey. Turkey is and I was talking about this. I remember when I said this in 2018, the then envoy of India to Turkey also told me that no, you shouldn't say things like this and so on and so forth. We are building a good relationship with them. But I was convinced that this was bad news, because Turkey was already starting to make noise about Pakistan and Kashmir and so on and so forth. And things have only become progressively worse. Of course, Operation Sindoor was, in a sense, the final straw that convinced all of us that Turkey is bad news. Classic sense, all these years when Turkey was doing this, all these, Indians have zero strategic sensibility. Zero. Like, we have zero strategic sensibility. Even when Turkey was poking us in all these ways, Indians by the tens of thousands were romping off to, I don't know,
to Istanbul for honeymoons and so forth.
Honeymoons and photo shoots in Istanbul and wedding or whatever, celebrations in Istanbul and all kinds of things.
Hot air balloons in Cappadocia.
No, I mean, look, Istanbul is a nice city. I mean, there's no running away from that. It has a lovely airport. I mean, every time I, stop over at Istanbul while going to the West, I mean, it's a lovely airport. It's comfortable and so on and so forth. It's one of the best airports in the world. And the food is great and so on and so forth. But the point is that we should have some strategic sense. And we developed that strategic sense once this whole thing of Operation Sindoor and this battle with Pakistan unfolded. But for a long time, Indians never understood that a major threat was brewing from Turkey. And I think now it's quite clear that it's, this is one of our big problems. And Turkey is, at least Erdogan's Turkey. Erdogan's Turkey is, is really ideologically against India.
Yeah, very much so. And we've also seen that with the children of Kashmiri separatists having been educated there and so forth. And of course, the Operation Sindoor was the big crescendo. Coming back to the BNP, who seems to be forecasted to at least have the lion's share of the votes in the forthcoming elections in Bangladesh. I think our government recognizes that as well. There's been a lot of outreach and so forth. There was some commentary in the book launch that you were speaking about that the Awami League and the BNP, in a sense, were forged from the same fire and have the same, at least, origin story. Does that give us enough space, you think, to do business with them? What do you think?
I think, if the BNP were to come back to power again, they would realize that no matter how much they want to be in bed with the Islamists finally only want to use them and take over the whole country.
Right.
I am sure Tariq Rahman understands this even today. And I think there will come a day when the BNP will realize that they're better off trying to make peace now that Khalida Zia is gone.
Yeah.
Right? See, by Bangladesh, they used to talk about this -2 formula, right? I mean, what is the -2 formula? It's basically both the Begums are not in the scene. Khalida Zia and Sheikh Hasina. Well, one of them is now gone, right?
Right.
So now that one of them is gone, there might just be space for some kind of, peacemaking between the BNP and the Awami League, faced with a common threat, with a very deep and stark ideological enemy that essentially wants to take over Bangladesh, right? I'm sure Tariq Rahman understands this. Certainly, Sheikh Hasina always understood this. Obviously, sometimes she couldn't do anything. That's a different thing. And, politicians always have this thing, right? That, sometimes they feel, okay, now, I want these votes also. If I pander to this segment also a little bit, maybe I'll get votes from here also, here also, here also, and so on and so forth, right? But, Islamism is a genie. Once you uncork the bottle,
yeah, there's no turning back.
That in the bottle is very, very difficult, as the Iranians are finding out.
Yeah.
The Iranians have found out to their own detriment. I mean, both you and I, as students of history, Ishan, I mean, you remember the girls in Iran cheering on as the mullahs came to power, right?
Of course. Yeah, literally descended from an Air France plane.
So, I mean, and what happened to those leftists after the mullahs took power? I mean,
they were told every revolution eats its own children.
Exactly. Right? So, as the Iranians have found out to their great detriment, that once you uncork the bottle of Islamism, and which, by the way, the Britain will one day find out to its own detriment, right? Once you uncork this bottle, bringing it back in, reining it in, is very, very difficult, because it is an ideological force. This is what people don't understand. A political party is fine, but most modern political parties barely have any ideology. They're only seeking to attain power. Their only ideology is power. So when they're confronted by a really strong ideological force, which doesn't want power alone, it wants to change and transform society itself, they struggle before such a power, right? And, I mean, I think, and I know what I'm saying today might sound a bit far-fetched to some people, but I think the beginnings of that has already happened. I mean, I would love to hear what Foreign Minister Jaishankar told Tariq Rahman, right? I mean, I have a feeling that one day the BNP under Tariq Rahman will understand, if things really go south, right? With Hizb Tahrir and Jamaat and whatever, that they are better off negotiating some deal with the Awami League to bring this together than trying to deal with the Islamists. And they should see from Pakistan's example, what happens to such countries. Right? Of course, the Pakistani elite are in a bubble, but that bubble is maintained by the Pakistani army. Right? And I don't know whether the Bangladeshi army, Bangladeshi army, remember, has already had all kinds of, ideological issues within and so on and so forth. Even in the last days of Sheikh Hasina, there was this whole thing that, the army might do something else. And, there was this whole tussle going on about Islamists within the army and so on and so forth. So, like I said, I mean, we will wait and watch. But I do think one day the progeny of Sheikh Hasina and the progeny of Khaleda Zia will
Might
realize
find
that they are
common ground.
better off, as somebody told me the other day, better off as two Nepo babies dealing with each other
In a sea of Islamists.
in a sea of Islamists, right? I mean, at the very least, they both lived in the West for a long time. They would understand each other, their instincts, and so on and so forth. So they are better off in each other's company than a sea of Islamists. Yeah.
And speaking of the Bangladeshi army, which you just brought up,
Yeah.
Muhammad Yunus was expected to actually uh, be in office a lot longer than it turned out. He was talking about, I think, 4 years of reforms and so forth. And it seems that he was compelled by the Bangladeshi army to, in fact,
And the Islamists.
and the Islamist rule. So why
Yeah.
would the Bangladeshi army compel him to speed up with elections?
I think there are elements within the army which wants a different kind of transition. And I think he always had a bit of a fraught relationship with the army.
Right.
So I think they basically wanted to push it to. Also, remember, if Bangladesh remains so chaotic, the money is not coming, right?
Yeah.
See, a lot of things is also at the elite level, a lot of things is also whether the money is coming in. See, under the Awami League, there was a whole bunch of people who were entrepreneurs and blah, blah. I mean, they made a lot of money, but those guys are in peril now, right? So where is the money coming from is the question to ask. And of course, the army, the Bangladeshi army and the elite within that army want some sort of negotiated settlement to the political question so that they can go ahead and do what they want to do, which is buy more arms.
Right.
They have something called a Vision 2030 document, and you should read it sometime. I mean, I found it fascinating when I read it. It's basically about modernization of the Bangladeshi army. And the kind of stuff that they want to buy is quite astonishing. One looks at that list and wonders who are they trying to fight. And inevitably, as an Indian, the answer, even though I don't want to hear that answer, the answer is actually India.
The deductive logic.
Yes, absolutely. So,
since you have actually read those documents, what do they want to buy? Incidentally, that would lead
no,
one
they
to
want to buy a whole range of very advanced weaponry.
Right.
I mean, see, this whole submarine thing really got our antennas up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
why does Bangladesh want submarines?
Right.
What are they going to do with it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, who are they going to use it against? Can be China, considering they're getting it from China, right?
Yeah.
Can't be anybody else. So it's a lot of. I mean, there's a whole list, and maybe with this video, I'll ask the editors to put up the link to that list, in Vision 2030, and somebody should go through them. It's a lot of very heavy-duty weaponry. And I think they are genuinely of the opinion that they can build this whole strategic narrative for themselves, this maritime first narrative where, they'll have strategic independence and this, that, and the other, which is all very well. But I mean, we can't forget that it's one of the poorest countries in the world.
Yeah.
In textiles, it really doesn't have any industry. Right? So, I mean, it's all very well to have these ambitions, but how they're going to pan out is, and therefore the only people who can give them this kind of weaponry are Pakistan and Bangladesh. Pakistan and China. Right? They are the only two people who can give them this kind of weaponry. So again, therefore, it becomes more tricky for India.
Would you say there's a single architect in that institution for the strategic vision, or is there something that is starting to come to light after a while? Because you have had other commentators say that given the history since 1971, their armed forces and our armed forces still have some sort of relationship that is supposed to be more than functional.
Well, which is why we were able to extract Sheikh Hasina.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I have no doubt that mob was coming to kill her.
Right.
Make no mistake, had India not extracted Sheikh Hasina that day, what happened in Afghanistan
to Najibullah,
would have happened to Sheikh Hasina. So, I have no doubt that the Islamists baying for her blood were coming to kill her. She escaped because India extracted her out. And India couldn't have extracted her out. I mean, of course, we have a lot of resources, but of course, with the help of the Bangladeshi Army.
Yeah.
Right? With the Bangladeshi head of the armed forces, who is a relative of Sheikh Hasina.
All right, so there are familial ties that have
absolutely
come into play.
So, but there also, nowadays people ask the question, well, if there are such familial ties, why didn't they protect her more, and so on and so forth. Look, I mean, when something like this happens, there will be many questions asked.
Yeah.
The fact is, I'm just happy about the fact that we could bring her out. Otherwise, I think her blood would have been on our hands.
That's true. That's true.
I have absolutely no doubt. Had we failed to get her out, her blood would have been on India's hands. Right? And as you know, we have long ties with the Hasina family.
Of course, since
Bangabandhu, Mujibur Rahman, and so on and so forth. Right?
Yeah.
So, and Hasina spent a large part of her, early life in India, remember?
Yeah.
When her whole family was killed, right? Before she went back. So, I think, I'm glad we got her out. And of course, she's now, in a sense, living under India's protection. But please remember, she doesn't give video interviews. She only does audio interviews. She doesn't want to give any sense of any location or locational whatever attributes, right?
And she's purportedly spotted in Lodi Gardens every now and then, and journalists tend to get excited.
Really?
About that.
Well, that's not very far away from your house. You should go there and request an interview.
We'll give it a shot.
But yeah, I think you should, stroll in Lodi Garden, and if you spot the Honorable Prime Minister, go and ask her for an interview. Yeah. By the way, I just want to mention this because I said Prime Minister. She is still the Prime Minister of Bangladesh because there has never been an election.
That's true. This was.
And Yunus's official designation was chief advisor.
Yeah, he's not. It's not an elected office.
So on paper, Sheikh Hasina is still the head of the Bangladeshi government.
And coming to, I guess, the Awami League's future in Bangladesh, a lot of this was, I mean, granted, you could say Islamists and so forth. We did see some truly shocking iconoclasm of sorts with, statues of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman being torn down and so forth.
Dhanmondi burnt again and again.
Yeah.
The iconic house where he was, he lived and was murdered and whatever.
Do you think the Awami League will have to reinvent itself in some ways in the future? Do you think the legacy of 1971 is perhaps too distant now for Bangladesh's youth?
But that's what Sheikh Hasina was trying to do, right? By really pushing up. Please remember, until all of this happened, up till 2 years ago, we were all talking about how Bangladesh is a miracle economy.
Yeah, that's true.
Please remember, I mean, I myself wrote an article saying,
right?
The narrative was that Bangladesh was a miracle economy. So that narrative really changed. I do think the good thing is that Bangladesh does have a very a core young population which is very politically and intellectually engaged.
Yeah.
So that population is really looking to find avenues to express themselves. And one good thing is because they are Bengalis, there is still that, in a sense, this sense of a certain Bengaliness in them culturally.
Right.
They are not radicalized quite in the same way, many of them. Right? I still have a faith. When we were doing this book release, MJ Akbar made this point that, at the end of the day, there is still this Bengali culture, right? Yeah. And please remember that the emblems of Bengali culture and Hindu culture are all over Bangladesh. I mean, at the end of the day, Dhaka is named after the Dhakeshwari temple, the great Dhakeshwari temple.
That's right.
So this confluence of Hindu and Muslim culture is very strong in Bangladesh. And I think the young in Bangladesh will soon realize, at least the core young in Bangladesh will realize, that going down the Islamist path has never helped anybody. They will realize what the Iranians realize. And they will then push back. And that's the best case scenario. I think Sheikh Hasina was trying to reinvent the Awami League to become this sort of, modernizing force, for the lack of a better phrase, right?
Yeah.
Which would bring wealth and boost per capita income, reinvent Dhaka, build nice buildings, all kinds of things, right?
Which are precisely the kind of things Islamists have always reacted to
Exactly.
in a hostile way, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there is no running away from 71. Look, I mean, no country can run away from its founding moment, right?
Yeah.
There is no, I mean, even if you try to wipe it out, it will come back to haunt you at some point.
Of course.
So for India, these are the, in a sense, hopefully the good things that might happen. But I do think before all this happens, there will be a period of intense churn in Bangladesh, and it will get very tricky. And because our Northeast is also restive, with what's going on in Manipur recently, of course, I saw today in the papers again, this Meitei guy who was visiting his family was brutally murdered. So that problem is not going away.
And Grace Collins suddenly becoming active in the US again, the Korean missionary with devious interests in Nagaland.
Yeah, so there you are, right? So all of this, and we should maybe, and I'm so glad you mentioned this, we must talk about this angle in Nagaland at some point.
Yeah.
In a separate conversation. Maybe we'll do that in a few days. But all of this will get support from elements in Bangladesh. That's the tricky part. I mean, look at what happened with the Sharif Osman Hadi murder, right?
Yeah.
Like the moment it happened, they decided to blame India.
Yeah, instantly.
When it turned out India had nothing to do with it. This was some internecine warfare happening within the groups. And the guy they were blaming of having gone to India was sitting in Dubai. So, I mean, they are so like, I anyway think that they had created that to try and push the elections back and blame India. Right. It backfired. That's a different story. Because Dhaka police very quickly, immediately said that they had no such information. They were immediately drum beating, saying, oh, India, India, India. But a few days later, the chap was doing, like, I don't know, video interviews from Dubai.
Yeah, so it was proven to be a silly conspiracy.
Completely wrong. But they mobilized in such huge numbers.
And I remember there were people who were concerned about our diplomats and
absolutely
and so forth. This period of churn that you're talking about, it is something India should pay attention to. How should India navigate this period, keeping, as you said, our Northeast in mind?
Yeah.
The Siliguri corridor, this demographic tumult that's happening in West Bengal. It seems that there's many things that could go awry. So what should be kept in mind by these?
I think the first thing we have to wait and watch to see what happens in the elections in Bangladesh. That's number one.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, we also have to wait and watch and see what really happens in the elections in West Bengal. I think the fate of both these two elections would show us a path on what to do next.
Yeah, in fact, Bangladesh comes before Bengal, West Bengal.
Absolutely. Yeah. So therefore, we will immediately get a sense in which direction the wind is moving and then move from there. Hopefully, I think the faster the path is paved for the return of Sheikh Hasina, the better it is. I think if things can be controlled and Sheikh Hasina can come back to Bangladesh and her supporters rally around her, there will be some, in a sense, relative stability that will be achieved. But whether that will happen or not, we don't know. Already we are reaching out to others like the BNP. Look, I mean, reaching out to Jamaat, I mean, we should open conversations with Jamaat. We should open conversations with anybody who's running Bangladesh. But it's obviously much easier for us to talk to, BNP than the Jamaat or Hizb ut-Tahrir or whatever, right? But considering we're talking to the Taliban, so
I was just about to say.
But remember, there's a difference. the Taliban, even though they are, of course, Islamists and a very strong Islamist force, they are also equally Pashtun.
Pashtun nationalists, yes.
They are Pashtun nationalists. Otherwise, they would befriend Pakistan, right?
Yeah, and Pashtun nationalists with claims on Pakistani territory. So,
exactly, and who have never accepted the Durand Line and so on.
Yeah, so
and as you know very well, as somebody who tracks this too, the Pashtuns will always tell you that they are Muslims only for a few hundred years.
Yeah,
they were Pashtuns for a much longer.
5,000, they say.
That's right.
Yeah,
they're Pashtuns for 5,000 years.
Yeah,
right. So that legacy is very strong, and that's where my hope in Bangladesh is, that the Bangladeshis, even though they are, even the Islamists in Bangladesh, have also been Bengalis for a much longer time. Right?
That's true. Yeah.
But not quite as long as the Pashtuns have been Pashtuns. So how it'll all play out, we don't know. I have some faith in cultural resurgence and, the power of Bengali culture. But India should wait and watch. And if Hasina can go back, nothing like it.
On that optimistic note, Hindol, that was most insightful. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.